And we are live on YouTube with someone that I admire, someone that is changing the narrative on business and work and finding meaning. Because you'll see, as Dr. Corey says, because we have the privilege to be live today with Dr. Corrie Block, it's important that you use those hours, those 8 hours, in a way that really brings meaning to you. Stick with us until the end. We are going to start shortly the actual Spotify polished recording. So get a pen and a piece of paper, which, by the way, let me get mine because this is going to be very interesting. I have here everything set up and very exciting to be seeing a whole new take on discipline and on motivation, Dr. Corey, because I see that that's something that you talk about as well. So, my fearless friend. Oh, yeah, this is definitely on the list. So, our fearless friends, get a pen and a piece of paper because this is going to be epic for today. It's like you cannot have a better talk about work than in the middle of the working week, right? That's right. And now going on Instagram Live in just a few seconds. Okay. We are live there as well. Just a second. Okay, yeah. By the way, Dr. Corey, our YouTube viewers are going to see you on a bigger screen here. So that's why I had to change a bit the Zoom setting. You'll see if you go on Instagram. And hello to Diana. Thank you for joining me. Hello, Mario. Hello to everyone. We are going to be starting in just a few seconds an amazing talk with Dr. Corrie Block, someone that I admire, someone that is helping us find meaning in the work that we do because it's really important to find that purpose that drives you, that keeps you engaged. Because otherwise, you know, what is life all about if things are not according to our heart as well? Finding that middle ground and seeing that business is really personal. And thank you to everyone that joined us. Fixing the phone, okay? And Dr. Corey, if everything's okay with you, I'm going to start the actual polished recording for Spotify. Yeah. Wonderful. Go ahead. Thank you so much. And we are starting in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 51. I cannot believe we are here already. Exciting today with Dr. Corrie Block. Find meaning at work. Since we are all very caught up in our activities, it's highly important that we truly find a purpose in everything that we do. Just a bit about Dr. Corey because he'll be doing the talking today. I'm just here to ask a question or two. Dr. Corey is a world leading expert in business strategy, organizational behavior, and leadership. He is the professor of strategic management and Monarch Business School in Switzerland and certified NLP and executive coach with over 25 years experience working on more than 150 companies. This is quite impressive. Your biography is quite amazing to read. You have so many achievements. However, Dr. Corey, how did it all start? What is your story? Thank you. Yeah, look, I'm humbled by all of that. I appreciate your introduction. If you want to know about my profile, connect with me please on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile, I don't know if you've looked at it, it's like a week long. It's daunting. But yeah, all of that started from very humble beginnings. I was 23 years old actually, and I was the inventory manager for the largest window manufacturing company in Canada. We made windows, and I was handling all the purchasing and inventory. It was a fairly good industrial job and good management position, and I was young. And then I was sitting with my dad in the backyard one day, and we were just having a drink together, and he said, son, he said, I've been working for the same company for 25 years, and I'm just not sure if I've wasted half of my life or not.
And I was like, oh, Dad, what a thing to say. And he said, no, like, it's fine. I'm okay. I'm committed where I am. But, all I'm saying is that if you want to do something crazy with your life, you should do it while you're young and you have time to clean up the mess. And so I got to thinking, wow, that's pretty good advice. So I went home. I was already married. I got married young. I was 20 years old. And I went home and I talked to my wife and I said, hey, listen, what do you think if we just quit our jobs and sell everything and move to the other side of the world for a while? She's like, okay. So she got excited about it. I got excited about it. And we did that. We sold everything. We had just a very small pot of savings. And we moved to the other side of the world. We moved to Estonia. It's a small post-Soviet northern Baltic state, absolutely beautiful, beautiful little country. Because we had a friend that was living there. And he said, you should come to Estonia. It's amazing. But it's a very small country. We ended up there. The environment for starting new companies and starting the organizations was very good. So we started our first organization there, but it didn't take off as quickly as we had hoped. We're learning the language. It's a foreign country. We're starting a new organization. Like, it was tough. And so for the first it was about a year actually. My wife and I, my first wife and I, we ate potatoes for almost a whole year. And that's because we couldn't afford anything else. There wasn't big grocery stores at that time. We didn't have a lot of money. We were spending almost everything that we had on rent and transportation, and then everything that we would pump back into the company. So my wife became anemic, and both of us were malnourished. Actually, after about 9 months, we got checked out by the doctor, and that was because we hadn't eaten protein. We were iron deficient. Like, it was really challenging. Walking to work in the snow, taking the bus in the minus 30-degree winter. It was a very challenging environment. And I think entrepreneurs nowadays have such an easier environment in which to start their companies. Now there's VCs and incubators and accelerators, and governments all over the world are pouring money and time and effort into making it easier to start organizations. Well, it wasn't always like that. And so for us in the very beginning, it was kind of a walking uphill every day, both ways in the snow sort of experience. But eventually we got it, and things started to work, and my first organization did very well. And so I started a few other companies. And in Estonia, I started 5 companies. 4 of them did well enough, and I exited from them, and one of them I buried. I failed in that company because I was arrogant. I was young. I was like 25 years old. I decided to start a clothing company. And who was I to start a clothing company? I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't do the market research. I poured a whole bunch of money into it and burned all of it. It died in its infancy. So I not only have I had successful organizations in the past, but I've had unsuccessful organizations too, and I know how to fail pretty spectacularly. But that was the beginning. After that, we moved to Yemen. We lived in Yemen for 5 years, and that was challenging. It was a challenging environment, but we moved there because we wanted to give our kids a new kind of experience in their lives. And I only intended to stay for a couple of years, learn Arabic, but the culture was so fun. It was so fascinating to live there. Such a different kind of life. It's like a whole different world. And so we stayed there for 5 years, and I did some consulting for the largest organizations in the country, did some work in oil and gas at FMCG, and then eventually we moved to Dubai. And in Dubai, I've been here for 10 years. Oh, I didn't tell you. In 2008, while we were living in Yemen, I went bankrupt for the first time. Okay, so I've been bankrupt twice. Okay, the first time I went bankrupt was in 2008. It was during the global financial crisis. We had all of our money invested, and our broker, who had done the investments for us, the investment broker himself went bankrupt. And so we lost everything. And it was very humbling because we were doing okay, like things were okay. We thought that we were stable, and then through no fault of our own, just everything is gone, right? So now I'm living in Yemen, no company, no savings, nothing. And so what do, right? You find the bottom of a bottle of beer and you get back to work. That's what you do. That's well, anyway, that's my methodology. You have a beer, and then you feel sorry for yourself, and then you go to work. That's it. You put a cap on it. Feel sorry for yourself for 10 minutes, and then get back to work. So then I built up again from nothing. When we moved to Dubai, and I've been in Dubai now for 10 years, I have started a couple of more companies here, successful ones, and then one which was my baby. I started a strategy consulting firm a number of years ago, and again, it was through no fault of my own. My partner, whom I was in business with, was indicted on fraud charges, and the company went down as a result of that because all of his trade licenses were suspended, and that included mine. So all of my investment, once again, done, all gone, just wiped away. 40 employees gone, right? And suddenly I have no company, no employees, and no savings again. And so I went bankrupt for the second time in my life, and that was 2015. So that was only 7 years ago. And everything else that I've done, I've built back up again from nothing. Find the bottom of a bottle of beer and you get back to work. You feel sorry for yourself for 10 minutes, and you get back to work because there's no other choice. So it's I'm not only a product of my success, I'm also a product of tremendous challenges and what many would consider to be catastrophic failures. I've been bankrupt a couple of times. I've buried 2 of my own companies in addition to the ones that have succeeded. And now I'm very grateful to have earned the right to do whatever I want, basically. So I have a great emeritus status in the industry, and now in the strategy and the executive coaching industry. And so I only work for companies that I think are cool. I only work on problems that I enjoy, and I only work with people that I would hang out with. So I have an employee roster of 1. It's just me in my company, so don't be impressed. I'm a solopreneur, and all of the other companies that I work with, I work with as an investor, not as an employee and not as a manager. So I have teams of people around me, but I'm not a direct line manager anymore. I'm an investor with them, so I have partners now instead of employees. Yeah, and I think it's a very different way to work and to live. But that's how I've earned my way to where I am now. Is just a tremendous amount of unsexy, unflattering, hard work. And that's what they don't tell you, I didn't get here from privilege. I didn't get here from luck. It wasn't great opportunity at the right time. It was just a lot of hard work. When my friends were at the club, I was in the library. And when others were at the bar on a Friday night, I was doing research and I was writing. And that was the key to getting me to where I am now, is the ability to decide what I want to do in spite of how I feel. Is the ability to choose to just get it done when it needed to get done. So now I'm very happy as an employee of a company of 1 and working for some of the biggest names in the world. I'm very honored to be doing coaching and training for companies like Microsoft, the World Bank, and the United Nations. Is really just a lot of fun being at that level and improving the quality of thousands of lives all at the same time.
What a story, Dr. Corrie. I mean, I have thousands of questions now. I think we'll be here for 5 hours. But since we only have a limited amount of time, let me just ask you, what are your biggest lessons from the failures that you went through? And I say failure like this with a quote because it's a normal part along the journey. We cannot expect to know it all from the very beginning, right?
Right. So first of all, I think one of the most important things that I've learned is that failure is a choice. It's a conscious choice. And I got to thinking about how we learn to fail. And I've got 5 kids, okay? So my wife and I, we have 5 kids between us, 21, 17, 8, and 5-year-old twins. And watching kids grow up is a very good indication of how humans are supposed to develop. And when I was watching my son's now 21 years old, but watching him walk for the first time, his name is Gabriel. He gets up, he's about 1 year old, and he's learning how to walk because he sees all of the big humans around him walk. It's like, okay, I need to be like one of the big humans. I need to walk, So he stands up and he puts his hand on the table and he tries to prop himself up, and he wobbles around a little bit and falls down. Well, Gabriel doesn't look up at me when he falls down and say, "I'm sorry, Dad, I seem to have failed. I'm going to be the only human that doesn't walk. Thank you for encouraging me to walk, but I just don't think this is for me. And I know there's other humans out there that don't walk because I've seen them. So I'll just hang out with them. But I appreciate all of your support." And I don't look at him and say, "Oh, that's okay, son. You gave it a good shot. You can just crawl like all of the other humans that don't walk. That's fine. It's fine, right?" I don't tell him that that's okay. Maybe walking's not for you. No, because that's not how humans are born. We're not born instinctively failing. We're born instinctively with two outcomes. When we try something for the first time, we have two outcomes. One is success, and the other is learning. Okay? We don't fail. We succeed or we learn. So when he stands up to walk, he falls down, but then he doesn't accept failure. He's down, but he has learned a way to not walk. So then he knows that the next time he stands up, he has to position his hips a little differently, position his knees and his ankles a little differently, make sure his balance is a little bit more in the center, and then he tries again, and maybe he falls again, and maybe he falls 6 or 7 times. But never once does it occur to him to just stop trying. It's only later on in our childhood, our early childhood development, that we learn to fail. And we are taught to fail by probably some loving, caring adult around us who looks at us and says, there, Corey, maybe that's just not for you. And then because that person is older than us and we respect them and we honor them and they're taller than us and they must be wiser than us, well, we believe them and we think, oh, maybe that's just not for me. And so we accept the possibility of failure. And that's when we learn to fail for the very first time. At some point in our childhood, we learn that failure is an option. And failure then becomes the conscious choice to forego the learning experience that comes from an undesired outcome and to stop trying. Once you ignore the learning experience and stop trying, then you've chosen that that's a failure. But that's a conscious choice, right? So I wouldn't consider the bankruptcies or the varied companies as failures because I learned from them. I learned from all of those difficult experiences. I learned what not to do and I learned what to do. And I learned how I wanted to value myself and my own life. And so I wouldn't consider those things failures because they were learning opportunities for me. Yeah, it was an undesired outcome. It was an unexpected, undesired outcome, and it was not fun. It was very hard, not pleasurable at all. But there were tremendous learning experiences for me. And so I learned that failure is a choice. And it was going to be my choice if I stood up again or not. And I stood up again. And I've learned actually that, well, first of all, ending your company is not fatal. You won't die from that. So if a company goes down because you as an entrepreneur make prideful choices or maybe your partner makes a mistake, well, you know what? It's survivable. It sucks, but you can survive it. You're not going to die from it. And bankruptcy. If you end up going bankrupt at some point in your life and you have nothing left in your savings account, it's survivable. Okay, it sucks. It's not fun. It's not a pleasurable experience, but you can survive that. And I've learned that. I've learned that these things, they're difficult, but they're not fatal, right? I haven't died as a result of them. And in fact, I've learned a great deal through them that I've been able to apply to my life subsequently. So yeah, that's what I've learned most from those hard experiences. I think the other thing that I want people to recognize is that the most fulfilling things in my life are not the things that made me happy. We are chasing happiness so much these days, right? We think, oh, we need to be happy. And happiness is so much a theme. In the UAE, we have the Minister of Happiness, and all of our government centers are called customer happiness centers. And in all of our HR programs, in all of the major companies, they're measuring employee happiness. How happy are our employees? And every time you walk in and out of a bakery or a restaurant, there's a little sign there to say, how happy are you with the service today? Well, we're measuring happiness as though happiness is what's going to matter to us in the long term, but it doesn't. What has mattered to me most in the long run of my life up until now is not the things that made me happy, but the things that were fulfilling. And the things that were fulfilling made me miserable at times, and I was decidedly unhappy. So things like raising kids, I can tell you now, as a father of 5 kids, raising kids does not make me happy. Like I spend about 15% of that time in bliss and joy and laughing my face off and having a good time. The other 85% is just really hard work, right? You got to feed them. You got to make sure they're not killing themselves. You have to make sure they get their homework done, clean their room, and show up on time to things. Like it's hard work. And it's the same with starting a company. 15% pure joy, 85% hard work. Doing a PhD, 15% joy, 85% work. Writing a book. All of these really fulfilling things, being in a long-term committed relationship, it's the same. It's 85% hard work, and I think that's true of everything that's going to be truly fulfilling in your life. If you want your life to be fulfilled, you have to get used to doing things that require work, because it's the effort, it's the 85% hard work that you put into it that makes it fulfilling. Whatever your long-term project is, raising kids, having starting a business, writing a book, finishing a degree, all of those things require a tremendous amount of effort, and nobody's going to be there to cheer you on, and you're going to have to kick your own ass in order to get that done, and that's not going to make you happy. If you want to be happy, eat a Big Mac and watch Netflix. Like that will make you happy. It's not going to be fulfilling, I guarantee you, but you'll be sitting there with lots of dopamine in your head, having a joyous experience watching a great movie, stuffing your face with sugar, fat, and salt. You're going to be happy, but it's not going to be fulfilling. And I think happiness is a distraction from fulfillment, and we're chasing the wrong thing. And most of us, we would find our lives to be so much more meaningful if we were chasing fulfillment instead of happiness.
Wow, I have not heard this perspective ever, Dr. Corey. I love it, and it just makes so much sense. And I was smiling when you told me about the children and how they get to start walking and how you just prevent them from killing themselves and all the hard work that's put into that. My 2-year-old last night, 5 a.m., still not asleep. She wanted to play. She wanted me to sing and to have her bedtime stories read. So you are so right. These are the things that are very fulfilling. That 15% that you get at the end of it. Love it.
Yeah.
Since
We distract ourselves so many times with things that aren't going to matter in the long term. And then we fill our lives with things that make us happy at the expense of true fulfillment. And so we never actually, it's becoming more and more rare for people to commit themselves. Like like I said, a long-term committed relationship can only succeed if you have the long term and if you have the committed. And the committed can only actually be defined as committed if you're doing it when you're not happy, when you're not like super joyous to be with each other, when you're working through something difficult. That's committed. If it's all easy, that's not committed. Committed is when you're together when it's hard. That's committed. And that's the same thing with anything. Like when you're doing something that takes a tremendous amount of work, doing a PhD takes thousands of hours of effort. Well, you have to be committed to that. And that's not going to make it. I honestly spent very little of that time thinking, oh, this is pure joy for me. Sometimes you have like this epiphany, or you read something that tickles your brain. It's like, oh, that's really cool. So I say, like, 15% joy, 85% really hard work.
wow.
And if you want to live a really fulfilling life, you have to do work.
Thank you for saying that, because in a way we are fed with overnight successes. Get 6, 5, 7, 8, 9 figures in a month, which is completely unrealistic. It takes time, it takes hard work. And would you say, Dr. Corey, that meaning in our work would relate to fulfillment directly?
Yeah, 100%. Look, one of the things that breaks my heart the most is when people say, when I ask them, I usually ask people, what's your name? What do you do? We ask each other this all the time. When somebody meets you for the first time, usually within 2 or 3 questions, they'll ask you about your job. Okay? Very interesting, because what you do for work is who you are in society. That's how you're adding value to the world in exchange for a part of the resources, so you can make your dreams come true, so you can pay the rent, feed your family, educate your kids, care for your parents. Okay, so you provide value to the world shares a portion of the resource with you. And that's the deal that you make. And so every time you meet somebody for the very first time, you usually ask them, what's your name? And what do you do? And the reason we ask what do you do is because that helps us to relate to you. Because your job isn't a job, it's a social role. That's who you are in the economic tribe. That's who you are in the society. That's how you're adding value to the world. So I want to know from you, what is your social role? How are you adding value to the world? Because that helps me know how to talk to you. Are you a project manager? Are you a construction worker? Are you a waitress in a coffee shop? Are you an architect or a lawyer? Once I know who you are as in your social role, then I'll know how to interact with you. I'll know a little bit about the things you might find funny, the news you might find interesting, the topics that we can discuss that we might have in common. So that's why it's really important for people when they meet you for the first time, like, who are you? Like, what's your name? And what do you do for work? Because work is intrinsically a part of your definition of who you are. Now, what breaks my heart is when people try to separate themselves from who they are in society. And they say things, you'll hear this because people will say things like, oh, it's just a job. It's not really who I am. And that's heartbreaking for me because, okay, let's take that statement. It's not who I am. Okay, so who are you? What is a human life? Okay, a human life from beginning to end is a collection of experiences. You have experiences from birth all the way to death. And if you have experiences from birth to death and you're participating in society fully, half of those experiences, or maybe more, are gathered at work. Your work cannot possibly be other than you, right? It's not all of you, but it's not other than you. And, mathematically speaking, it's roughly half of you. You're going to spend a third of your life sleeping, and of the other 2/3, you're going to spend half of it at work and half of it not at work. So whatever you're doing for work, yeah, it's you. It's not all of you, but it's not other than you. And so it really hurts me when I hear people say, oh, it's not who I am, it's just a job. I go to work, they pay me, and I do the work. I'm like, no, that you're missing so much of the richness of life because look, you don't know how many days you get in your life. You just know that once they're gone, they're never coming back. And if you can't find meaning in what you're doing with half of your life every day, well, that's going to have a serious long-term detrimental psychological effect on how you view your life. And why would you want that?
Exactly.
And it hurts me when people say that. Oh, it's just a job. It's not who I am. And I think, no, that's so wrong because whether you like it or not, that is where you're gathering half of your experience as a human every day. And for me personally, I'm not willing to waste half of a human life today, and I don't think you should either, especially not your own. So I think everyone should try to pursue connecting with the meaning and purpose for why they show up to work every day. And it doesn't matter where you work or what you do, because most people, most of the time, we don't care what we do for work. We care very much about why we're working and who we're working with. And if we have good relationships with the people around us and we have a clear understanding of our purpose for showing up every day, the what doesn't matter, right? I was doing restructuring for the ATCO group of companies in Oman about 4, maybe 5 years ago now. And I met this guy named Mohammed. He's really cool. He's a ketchup salesman, right? Like, tomato ketchup that you put on potatoes. Potatoes that I lived on for a year in Estonia, I put ketchup on every day. And so Mohammed is like the best ketchup salesman in the Middle East and North Africa. And he sells tens of thousands of metric tons of ketchup every year. And so I asked him one day, I was sitting down with him just to talk to him about work. And I said, hey, listen, how come you're so passionate about ketchup? And he laughed at me and he goes, Dr. Corrie, that's really funny. Nobody's passionate about ketchup. And I says, but you're the most effective ketchup salesman in the Middle East. And he says, yeah, but that doesn't mean that I love ketchup. I love my team. I love the people that I work with. The guys in the factory are really cool. My sales team is really great. I love my boss. I love the owners of the company. They're really cool. It's all like a big family here, and I love spending my time with these people. I love winning, so I love it when I go in to talk to my clients and I'm able to give them something that they feel is a win, and they're able to give me something back that I feel is a win. I can bring resources back to share with my economic community. I love that. And I love my family. I love that my being in this job and selling ketchup allows me to give my kids a better quality of life than I had and more education options that I had growing up. But I'm not in love with ketchup. No, I'm not in love with ketchup. And I thought, that's such a good answer, right? Like, because it doesn't matter, right? You can be in any kind of game. Now, Muhammad is a salesman in the ketchup game. But you could be in the fast-moving consumer goods game. You could be in the restaurant game, the aviation game. You could be in the education game. It doesn't matter. You could be in the oil and gas or the luxury shoes game, and it doesn't matter which of the economic games you're playing. What matters is who's next to you on the field in that game, and why are you there? If you get those two things right, then you can sell ketchup and have the time of your life.
Wow, love it. So it's who and why. It doesn't really need to be your most passionate thing that you are working with. And indeed, ketchup is interesting, but yeah, you would not expect someone to be in love with it. Listening to you say about this, Dr. Corey, a few years ago, I was in a place where I would hate my job, I would hate my existence. And it all makes sense as I heard you talk now because I could have made the decision to just look at things from a different perspective, appreciate
Yeah.
the people I had around me, which I was too self absorbed, as you said at the beginning, maybe arrogant, a lot of
Yeah.
ego. I thought I knew it all and I just focused on the activity itself when indeed it's just so much more that brings fulfillment. So thank you
Yeah.
for saying
Yeah.
about that. And
No, it's my pleasure. Yeah.
could you please share with us what would you say that fear had to do with your personal development? How do you see fear?
Oh, look, fear is usually of something we don't know or we don't understand. We typically fear things we don't know or we don't understand, or we fear things that we've inherited, like public speaking, for example. I was afraid of public speaking when I first started. I started really young, but public speaking is the most common fear among humans, more than the dark, more than heights, spiders, snakes. Public speaking, right? Standing up in front of humans and talking is a very dangerous thing, because if you think back to the 10,000 generations of humans that got you here, right? All 10,000 generations, they were successful, they survived, and they adapted. And one of the things that kept them successful was that they did not stand up in front of crowds of people and speak. Because if you think about the way the world used to be, when we lived in an era of violence and scarcity, when there wasn't enough resources to go around, when people died of starvation and simple diseases, and and there were tiny wars, and there was always threats coming at you. It was a very dangerous thing to stand up in front of people and talk. If you were going to stand up in front of a crowd, you're standing up in front of a group of like a few dozen, maybe 100, maybe a few thousand apex predators, right? Other humans are the most dangerous, clever animals on the planet. And if you're going to stand up in an age of violence and scarcity and say anything, guaranteed that whatever you say, no matter what it is going to make two or three of those apex predators very angry. And they might want to kill you for what you've said. So public speaking, traditionally speaking, has been associated with death, right? You don't stand up and speak in public, because people who stand up and speak in public generally die young.
Wow, this is
So we
brilliant.
inherit a lot of those fears, right?
Yeah.
And we have all of these mechanisms in our heads that are helping us to survive in a world that no longer exists. Up until maybe 250 years ago, it would have been considered perfectly civilized behavior for me to challenge someone to a duel on the street if they insult my mother over dinner. And then we would stand on the street and shoot at each other until one of us died, because that was very civilized behavior back then. It was extremely violent. And we don't do that now. And there's still war and there's still violence in the world, but we're living, relatively speaking, in the most peaceful time in all of human history, with the most abundance. We have so much abundance now, more opportunities for jobs, for different kinds of career paths. Most of us can eat more than one meal a day, and most of us can choose what we eat for those 3 meals a day. Like, it's amazing how far we've come just in the last 150 to 250 years. And yet the mechanisms that we have in our brains, mostly the fear mechanisms, are designed to help us to survive in a world that no longer exists, a world of scarcity and violence. And so I think fear, for me, has been one of those things that reminds me of what helped my ancestors to survive. But it also triggers me to question why it is that I'm afraid of this particular endeavor. Is it because there's a real existential threat? Am I going to be excluded from the community? Am I going to be cut off from the resources of the world? And is my family going to starve and die in the streets because of this decision? Well, probably not. So why would I be afraid of it? And yet the mechanism of fear in the back of our heads is designed to help us become alert to things that in the past, yeah, there would have been very dangerous decisions to make. But we just don't have that many dangerous decisions anymore. And so a lot of the things that we're afraid of, they're not appropriate, because we don't live in the world for which those fear mechanisms were designed to help us survive.
This is the best, most brilliant definition of fear that I have ever heard. We are no longer in a world that is that dangerous like it was hundreds or thousands of years ago. Very
That's
rational,
right.
and I love it so much. And I think that our audience can really put this in practice, because you only need to think a bit, okay, why am I feeling this fear? And you'll
Yeah.
understand exactly what is the mechanism behind it. Would you
Yeah,
say
100%.
Yeah, definitely. And would you say that discipline had a very big impact in how you got to conquer yourself, to conquer your ego, to have the successful and meaningful life that you have now?
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, like okay, so there's a process here, right? We talk a lot about motivation in organizational behavior. We talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and how are humans motivated. But the fact is that motivation is actually a very weak force. Motivation, in its most basic sense, is a small hit of dopamine. You've heard of dopamine before? It's a neurochemical. It's the most addictive, most pleasurable experience that a human can have. Okay, and you produce dopamine in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, just here on the side of your brain. When you think about getting something done, that's motivation. The problem with motivation is that it only lasts somewhere between 5 and 40 seconds. After 40 seconds, it's gone. All of that dopamine, it's done. So your brain rewards you for thinking about getting something done. Okay? But after 40 seconds, that reward is gone. And if you don't actually do what you were supposed to do, guess what happens? Your brain rewards you again, but not not here in the front of your brain, but back here in the anterior insula of your brain. It gives you another hit of dopamine next to the risk avoidance center of your brain to reward you for avoiding the risk associated with getting something done. So, for example, if you say, "Oh, I need to exercise," right? And you're sitting on the couch, you're watching Netflix, you've got a Big Mac in your hand, and you think, "Oh, I really should go to the gym." Your brain gives you a hit of dopamine to reward you just for thinking about going to the gym. It says, "Yeah, that's a good idea. You should go to the gym, Corey. Good job." All you have to do is sit there and wait, okay? 30 seconds, 40 seconds. If you don't stand up, then your brain goes, okay, right, so Corey's not going to the gym. All right, it must be, since he's the cleverest animal that has ever existed on the planet, it must be that he's avoiding a risk associated with going to the gym. Maybe there's a storm outside. Maybe there's a pack of wolves or lions between his house and the gym. Maybe there's a foreign tribe that's going to attack him and kill him at the gym and then take his family as slaves. Like, so your brain says, yeah, you avoided the risk of going to the gym. Good job, Corey. So it gives you a hit of dopamine next to the risk avoidance center to reward you for not going to the gym, or for not writing the report, or for not starting your book, or for not launching your company. Okay? Your brain rewards you for not doing what you know you should be doing, because it's assuming that you're avoiding a risk by not doing it. Because what sensible apex predator would be motivated to get something done and then just choose not to do it? That doesn't make sense. That's not how your brain evolved. Your brain evolves to say, okay, you're an apex predator. If you feel motivated to do something, you should just do it. And if you don't do it, that's because there's a risk. Good job avoiding the risk. So that's what happens is your brain actually, this is in the study of motivation, your brain actually rewards you for not getting something done. So you get one hit of dopamine for thinking about it, one hit of dopamine for not doing it. And that's how you become neurochemically addicted to not feeling like getting anything done. So you wonder why you sit on the couch day after day and you think, oh, I should go to the gym, or oh, I should write my book, but you don't actually do it. It's because you're literally addicted to not feeling like doing it. That's motivation. Discipline is here. It's in the prefrontal cortex. And discipline is the ability to choose your behavior regardless of how you feel, with or without the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin, with or without the anandamide, the norepinephrine, or the endorphins. With or without any of those neurochemicals, you have a very powerful machine right here, and you can get up off the couch at any time of any day, and you can do what needs to be done. That is willpower. That is discipline. Discipline is the skill of being able to choose your behavior regardless of how you feel. You're angry, but you're going to engage anyway. You want to leave, but you're going to remain committed. You're tired, but you're going to get the report done. You're lazy, but you're going to go to the gym. Like, choosing your behavior regardless of how you feel, that's discipline. And the good news is that if you can ignore the motivation trigger and untrigger and just forget the weakness of motivation and choose discipline, the good news is that if you choose to discipline yourself, you can pattern yourself into a behavior. And after a certain amount of days, the studies are vague on this, but roughly speaking, it's 21 days, no days off. If you do the same thing over and over again for 21 days with no days off, you will pattern your brain to expect that behavior. And then motivation, which is weak, becomes discipline, which is strong, becomes habit. And habit is effortless.
Wow.
And that is the key. The key is understanding that discipline itself is a transitory phase. It's not something you're going to have to do for 20 years, but it is something you're going to have to do for 20 days. And once you execute that discipline over and over and over again for 21 days, it forms into a habit, and the habit is effortless. Then that becomes pattern behavior, and whatever it is that you were supposed to do, you do naturally. You don't even think about it. You don't have to argue yourself into going to the gym. You just get up and go, because that's the time you go to the gym every day. You don't have to convince yourself to write your book because, well, that's the time that you write every day. You don't have to convince yourself to start your company because it's already started and this is the time every day when you work on it. You know? So translating motivation, which is weak, into discipline, which is strong, that's the first step. But then maintaining that discipline for as many days as it takes to make it into a habit, that's the second step. And the good news is that once you get it into a habit, it's pretty much effortless. You don't have to make a decision anymore.
This is beyond fascinating. I am learning so much from you. So thank you very much for sharing this priceless information. Now that's why we just don't get things done, because we're just literally stuck into these 2 doses of dopamine. I did not know this.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah, look, the research on the second hit of dopamine, the one in the anterior insulin, that research was only completed in 2019. We've only known this for 3 years, okay, in the neurosciences. It's new information, but it explains a lot. Now we understand what procrastination is. Procrastination is a neurochemical addiction to producing dopamine in the wrong part of your brain. That's all it is. And if we understand that, well, we can train ourselves out of it. Look, humans are wonderful creatures, right? We're marvelously complex, incredibly creative, passionate, sometimes loving, sometimes mean, sometimes horrible to each other, and sometimes all of those things all on the same day. And if you're married, sometimes all to the same person, all on the same day, right? So we're incredibly complex creatures, but we're definitely hackable. And if we understand just a little bit more about how we're designed and the kind of world that we're designed to live in, and the kinds of tools that we have that we're carrying with us from 1 million years of success, well, we can hack ourselves. We're clever enough to do that. And we can change the direction of our lives in just a few simple steps. Yeah, it takes work, but the work is not hard. It's not nearly as hard as it was for your ancestors. You live in an abundant world now with so many opportunities, and the only thing standing in your way is you.
You are so right, and we do live our best life ever in the best, most modern times in this world since the universe was created. And since you help people just have their most amazing, spectacular professional lives full of meaning, Dr. Corrie, I'm sure that everyone will want to know where can they get in touch with you, and most especially, how can they work with you?
Yeah, sure. Look, my primary channel is LinkedIn. I do all of my content is echoed on Instagram and Facebook. You'll find me on Instagram and Facebook, but my primary channel really is LinkedIn. Please find me on LinkedIn. I'm always putting up new content there. Secondly, find me on my website, drcorrieblock.com. You'll learn from how to spell my name. I'm very Googleable, okay? Google knows exactly who I am and where to find me. I'm not difficult to find. So find me, reach out to me. I work with companies as a leadership trainer, and I do workshops and keynote speeches and organizational strategy and restructuring. And I also work with individuals. I'm one of the premier executive and business coaches in the region. So if you're looking to take your career to the next level, just keep in mind that nobody becomes the top of their game in any industry without a coach. There's no Olympian that doesn't have a coach. There's no high-level actress or actor. There's no best musician. There's no top-level surgeon in the world without a coach. So recognize that, and then it'll be a lot easier for you to know how to engage me. But yeah, look, I've got lots of materials out there. If you want something that's really cheap and cheerful, a fast way to engage with some of my best thoughts, I've got a couple of books out. This is Spartan CEO. It's on Amazon, not difficult to find. And this is Business is Personal. This is all about meaning at work. It's also on Amazon, not difficult to find. So find the books. That's a cheap way to get in touch with me, very affordable. Otherwise, connect with me on LinkedIn or through my website. I'd be really happy to hear from you. And if I can help to improve the quality of your life, I will.
Wow, Dr. Corey, today has been elevating and inspiring to say the least. I would have wanted to say motivating, but then I changed my mind. Not motivating, but making us to go into action and do
Good.
those things that really just, we have one life to live. Any way
That's
we
right.
take it, it's just one life, so we need to make it count. And especially the business professional side where we just spend so
That's
much
right.
time, so much energy. Thank you for
Yeah, that's
joining
right.
us. What a
It's my pleasure,
privilege.
Roxana. Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope that your audience finds some benefit in this, and uh, bless you and have an amazing life.
Thank you so much, Dr. Corey. Thank you very much. And saying goodbye to our friends on YouTube, thank you for joining us. You are going to find all of Dr. Corey's details in the description of this live session. You will love his amazing content. And yes, LinkedIn was the place where I found you. I loved your very inspiring content there. So
Thank you.
have a talk with Dr. Corey. Goodbye to you and thank you very much for joining us. Okay.